All right, we got an awesome message for you. I'm super excited because you're getting a message from the most awesome Christopher Hogan. Whoop whoop! He has a microphone. This is
I
really
have
awkward.
my own mic.
Okay.
Thank you, though. Thank you. All right. Open up your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. Yeah. Feels good. It feels good. Haven't got to be up here preaching in a hot minute, so it's quite nice. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. So last week, we taught about the Sermon on the Mount. It was a section. It was specifically about lust and everything. And we're going to continue on reading a little bit about the Sermon on the Mount. It's really cool. But because I haven't got to preach at all this year, this physical year, 2023, I felt like it was quite needed that I had to share a soccer story before I really hopped into things, right? Like it feels right, it just feels right. It's always the right move, yeah. Well, as you guys know, I really like soccer. I played a lot throughout all my life, but for a long time, I was very, very competitive. If you were to play like board games and stuff with me now, you would be like, you're not competitive at all. Like, you kind of are, like you like to win, but at the same time, you're really chill about it. Back in the day, I was significantly less so. Like, I was not chill. Like, I was really, really competitive. And on top of that, I was also really, really protective over my teammates and like my coaches and everything. And so when there would be a player on the other team or another coach or heck, even a ref, like that was being rude, that was being bad to my team, like say that they did like a really dirty tackle on purpose and they're like, kind of stuff or whatever, like I would then, because I was a defender, make sure that instead of trying to play for the betterment of the game, to regain possession and do some cool stuff for my team so that we can win, I would then instead look to time my tackles properly to make sure that kid hit the ground. And I was really good at it. Like, I was really good at it. Or sometimes, in one case, there was a coach who was just a serious jerk. Sometimes you just have to kick the ball out of bounds. And if it happens to go by, the bench and it hits him, then, so be it, I guess. And that's the kind of stuff that I would do all the time. And it really didn't get me into too much trouble until eventually it did. And I tackled a dude, and he was able to flick the ball just out of reach. And it was a real weird way of how he kicked the ball. But it made it so that when I went in for the tackle, my foot hit his foot and not the ball, and he went flying, and I got a red card. And for those of you who don't know what a red card is, it means that you're ejected from the game, your team has to play a player down, you're not allowed to play the next game, and matter of fact, you're not allowed to even show up to the field for the next game. You have to stay home. And in certain cases, and this is when I was in high school, sometimes you had to actually appear in front of a board of people, ask for forgiveness, and say, I'm not going to do that stupid thing that I did again, to allow you to play again. And as you can imagine, all those things are very, very detrimental to your team. And honestly, it sucks. Like I said, I was very competitive, and I hated being on the bench. It was far worse having to sit at home knowing that a game was going on that I totally should have been at, but because I let my anger towards another player ruin my chance to keep playing the game. So I share that story because we're talking about forgiveness today. We're talking about forgiveness. And I want to preference this section that it's a little bit difficult to fully understand because it's filled with a lot of nuance, and it's also filled with a lot of references to things that are very cultural for the Israelites. So let's hop in. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. If you haven't found it yet, you're a little slow, but that's okay. Verse 38. You've heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue at you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. If you're like me and don't have a super extensive knowledge of the laws in the Old Testament, a lot of these references that Jesus is making might seem a little confusing. So let's break it down real quick. So you have the first one, and it's eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So this was actually a law in the Mosaic law in the book of Exodus. I almost said Acts. In the book of Exodus, that essentially meant that, hey, if someone wronged you and did something, like say that they stole one of your cattle, you got to take their cattle as well, or something equivalent to it. And it's this equivalent exchange type justice. For a wrong being done, you get your retribution. And see, the Israelites took this to the extreme. They saw that law and thought that it was an obligation. They thought it was something that was supposed to be played out not only in the justice system, but also in our daily lives with our interactions with each other. So if someone do something evil to me, I get to be evil back to them. It's my obligation. And you'll notice a trend throughout all of this that Jesus takes their expectations and completely flips it. That's not what that law was supposed to mean. See, the law of the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was supposed to just be a limit for the justice system. It wasn't an obligation. It was a limit for how far they could seek retribution through, a judge being in front of a court. It was not meant for our interpersonal relationships with people. And so he says, do not resist an evil person. Then the next one is if he slaps you on your right cheek. And that might seem a little weird. It's like, all right, if he slaps you, then you got to give them the other one. But it's specific with what side of the cheek that it's saying. It's the right one. And like now and back then, most people, their dominant hand is their right hand. So if someone is slapping with their right hand on the right side of your cheek, what part of their hand is hitting the cheek? It's the back. It's not meant to be a slap that's giving you a black eye, or one of those the slap king contests where they slap each other really hard over and over and over again till one quits. It's not one of those types of slaps. It's like a kind of thing. It's meant to be an insult. It's meant to be something that, instead of physical damage, is emotional damage. It's supposed to make you just feel terrible. And it's this insult. So when you're insulted, you let it happen, is what Jesus says. He's like, turn the other cheek. Give them the other one. Let them insult you twice. Then the next one. If someone wants to sue you, and specifically it actually says tunic in other translations. And it's not just a shirt. It's not like the shirts that you guys are wearing right now. It's it's something that you would wear almost at a wedding. It was a nice garment. And it's your right in the book of Exodus and the Mosaic Law. It's your right. If someone were to take your shirt, you can sue them. That is your right. That is your God-given right, literally because the law was given by God. And Jesus says, if they want to sue you for your shirt, cool. Give them your cloak as well. Which is so you have the button-up shirt and then the tuxedo thing over the top, the blazer. Give them both. I mean, they need the full ensemble, right? And then the last one, which is probably the biggest, oh man, it had to have made them so mad. It's this: if you're compelled to go a mile, That sounds weird, right? Like it says that if someone asks you to go a mile with them, go 2. It's like, okay. Like, my cross-country coach told me to run a mile, so I guess I'm running 2 now. It's not that. It's this idea that the Roman government was very abusive. They were downright evil to the Jews. You see, the Jews did not like them at all. They wanted Jesus to be this radical, kick down the doors, bringing down the Roman Empire, and starting the new rule of Israel, the new Jewish rule. And that's what they wanted Jesus to be. And so with this idea of being compelled to go a mile, it was that a Roman soldier, if they were walking by and it's like, hey, carry this for me, they could toss you their stuff and you had to do it. As a Roman citizen, you just had to do it. You're basically a slave for however long they asked you to carry the thing. And so Jesus is saying, when they do that to you, set aside your pride, go twice as far. And that had to have made them mad. It had to have made them mad. And so if you're like me and you're reading this, you might be wondering a few questions. Personally, the first time that I read this, I was like, all right, so am I not supposed to stand up for myself? If there's injustice in the world, do I not, seek for, justice to be, held, fix those problems? Am I not allowed to protect myself? If someone, says, put him up, am I not allowed to put him up? And the answer is no. That's not what any of this means. You see with Jesus specifically in his, entirety of his career, his mission. It's not a career. His mission. His career was woodworking. It was. Carpentry. If you look at all the things that he did, this would be a very hypocritical statement for Jesus to make if it was to be that stuff. It'd be super hypocritical. I mean, the dude literally sat in the temple and made a whip and then started flipping tables and cracking it down. So obviously he's not fully against some form of, violent act. Technically wasn't against people, but, we're not going to go there. But he wasn't necessarily against that, right? When there was, injustice, you had, the prostitute that was going to be stoned. He went and he stopped it and made sure that the injustice didn't happen. So he stood up against injustice. And then the right to just protect yourself. I mean, Peter had a sword. We know that because he cut off a dude's ear. If Jesus was so against protection, he wouldn't have let him have a sword in the first place. Yeah? Yeah, well, it's because it's a very obscure quote and probably hard to explain. But yeah, so if that's not what Jesus meant, then what does he mean? What does he mean with this? And the idea is honestly pretty simple. So there's going to be people who are going to insult you, whether it's friends, family, schoolmates, teachers, coworkers, whatever, just random people on the street, people online. There's going to be people who are going to insult you. That's going to happen. There's going to be injustice. It is going to happen. There's going to be things that are just downright terrible that you're going to have to work through. And before I go too much further, it's also not saying that there's no validity to the feelings that you feel in those moments when you experience it. Because it's very real. Jesus is quite literally calling them back to hey, it's your right to be angry, basically. The Mosaic Law gives you that right. But these things are going to happen. And if you are seeking out a fight, if you are seeking out to get even with people all the time, it's only going to lead to bitterness in your life. It's only going to lead to missed opportunities. Like, it's a simple analogy with my soccer story, but because I decided to be bitter towards people who were jerks, I missed out on being able to play the rest of that game and the next one. Now, I don't remember if we lost or won, so I don't know what happened there. But it caused issues, and I missed out on opportunity to play the game that I loved. And when we let bitterness just take root in our lives and start clouding our judgment, we miss out on all the opportunity that is around us. And trust me, there's plenty of opportunity because of the exact same thing that I said just a little bit ago, that there is injustice, there is insults, there is hurt that people experience. And you have the opportunity to help them, to be there with them, to show love to them. And if you're too consumed by bitterness, you're not going to be able to do that. Or at least not as effective. And so, again, if you're like me, you might be asking, well, how? How do I not get consumed with this? Because, dude, is it frustrating? It really sucks when you're in a situation that is just downright painful. And I've had plenty of experiences like that, where I just, leading down roads of just pure depression and just frustration and anger at a lot of different people in my life. So how do you not get fed up? How do you not let this bitterness consume you? And it starts with just understanding the love that God has for you. It's a simple thing. We talk about it all the time here. But God cares deeply about each one of you. He created each one of you specifically, and he said, hey, you are loved so much that the classic quote, that God for so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him would not perish but have everlasting life. He loved you so much that he made a way for you to be at peace. Because he knew that you're going to be with him in heaven. You're free from your sin. You could be at peace. You can feel that comfort of his love and give it to other people. And it's just so, so important that we do that. Because again, we've all experienced pain. And it's our job, it's what we're called to do as Christians. How many of you have heard of the whole armor of God? Okay, most of you guys that aren't raising your hand, but that's okay. Why do you need armor? What is the purpose of armor? Yeah, protection. It's to protect you. You're going to battle. And in our case, there is people who are quite literally getting arrows rained down from the devil, from evil, from society, that are raining down on them, pinning them to the ground. You have the armor. You have the armor right here. You have the love of God that allows you to go and stand in front of them, hold up your shield, block those arrows, and say, hey, get up. We can do this together. You have that ability. And when you do that, you radically transform everything around you. And I don't know about you, but I would much rather live in a world where people are more peaceful, more full of love, more full of joy. Honestly, that just sounds nice, right? And we have the ability to do that. And so it's something that I know I say it a lot. I'm a broken record, man. But it's so true. You guys have so much more value than you think you do. And I'm not talking some grandiose thing of you're going to make the cure for cancer. Maybe you will. I don't know if that's the thing that you want to do. But man, we're out here battling for souls. I know when you talk like the soul and the spirit, it kind of sounds like a little bit of hippie talk. But we're out here battling for souls. Like, we're out here hoping that everyone is able to go to heaven. That is what we're hoping for. That's what we're battling for. And that's a pretty big deal. And if you can help one person, just one person, go to heaven, all of heaven rejoices. They get pumped. And it also means that when both of you guys go up to heaven, you get a party together. And that's pretty cool. I like to party. Partying is fun, man. Under the right circumstances and with the right substances and everything. But like in heaven, we're going to have good food and lots of fun. Or lack thereof. I don't know, man. Like, there's that like song like Big Big House. It leads you to a lot of confusion of like what's actually heaven like. You're going to be fulfilled. We don't really know. It's going to be cool though. And you definitely want to be there. And so that's what I want to encourage you guys with. Is that if you're dealing with stuff, if you're dealing with insults, like just injustice, hurt, brokenness, if you're dealing with that, first of all, I want you to really know that, like, hey, you're not alone. You're not alone. Everybody in this room has dealt with stuff, and we're all here together. We talk about being a family. We're all here to be a family to help each other out with that. And because of the love that God has for you, you can share that love with others and help them have peace, have joy. So that's what I want to encourage you guys with. Let's pray, and I'll dismiss you guys to small groups. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for each of these students. I thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to be here, to just have a family that cares. This is not even just a random family. This is a chosen family. We chose to be here. We chose to hang out with each other. Maybe not exactly every last person in this room, but we chose to be here. So by choice, we are a family. Lord, I pray for each of these students that if they're dealing with stuff, remind them that you are there with them, that you care about them, and you are far bigger than the pain that they're dealing with right now, and that they are going to be able to get through it. Countless have before in the past, countless will in the future, so you in the present will get through this current circumstance as well. And Lord, I pray for each one of them that they start to see the people around them not as reasons to be angry, not as reasons to be frustrated or pick a fight, but rather as reasons to share love, as reasons to share your love. Lord, allow them to experience your love so deeply that it just overflows to everyone around them, that it's something that they just can't stop. Lord, I believe that each of these students are capable of so much, and that you see them as worth, as value, that they are so important, that you care deeply about them. So Lord, remind them of that. Lord, I pray that the rest of their week goes well, that you're right there with them, they're able to see the opportunities that you have laid in front of them to share your gospel. Lord, I pray over conversations during small group that'll be fruitful and helpful. Pray this all in your name, Jesus. Amen.